Hello everyone, my name is Armando Perez-Carreno and welcome to the Web Talk Show. Is Gemini 3 Pro the game changer that everyone's talking about? That's the topic for today. We were able to test it last night and we're running it today as well. Running some tests on real life situations and seeing if it's really keeping up to the hype. I think it's great. I'll start with that. It's a good tool. Is it ready for prime time? That's what I'm trying to uncover this morning. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, ideally in a YouTube chat, because that way I'll see it right here. Otherwise, if you leave a comment on LinkedIn, Instagram, etc., I might be able to catch it live on the phone and get back to you with my reply. So, what is Gemini 3 Pro? If you haven't heard any of the hype around it and you don't know what I'm talking about, well, Gemini 3 Pro is Google's answer to Anthropic and ChatGPT, OpenAI's ChatGPT, and many other competitors in the space for their state-of-the-art model. Now, this model is very, very powerful. And in benchmarks, it's just destroying benchmarks. It's doing very well in all sorts of things, especially like vibe coding games and things like that. There's people showing off its capabilities in tons of videos around the web. And that's all great. But I know many of you, if you've been testing vibe coding or LLMs, etc., you might be in that position where you're not sure and you're hearing all the hype and you think to yourself, oh, should I just burn the boats and go over to Gemini? I don't think you should. This is the same thing that happened when OpenAI came out. Everyone's using that. Then Anthropic comes out with a new model and some people jump over. It might be a good idea, might not. Then Cloud Code comes along, but then GitHub has the Copilot, and then they have the CLI, and you're just jumping all over the place, and that doesn't really help you because you're relearning how everything works. Even though everything is pretty similar, there's still things and nuances between the different systems. So it's better to stay with the one that you know works and it's working for you, unless you have an issue already, maybe it's not doing what you want, etc. Then yeah, for sure, try other models. It's always good to experiment. However, with all the hype around Gemini 3 Pro, I decided to take a look last night and download the Antigravity software, which is their attempt at an IDE or agentic IDE experience. It's another fork, we could say, of VS Code, Cursor, etc. It has two parts to it. It has the regular code editor, but then it has a sort of the agent manager experience, which I can show on the screen in a few moments. And it's similar enough with the code part that you can just feel at home. You can even import your settings and things from Cursor or VS Code. So you can just bring in your projects. You can even bring in the workspaces. I just opened a workspace that I already had, pulled it open, everything came in through. I could just start working with it. So good. That part, you can just continue to work that way. And you can have a little screen on the side, like a little sidebar, same as you would with the Cursor, AI, chat, or within Cursor. Also, if you're using Claude Code with their extension, you can do it that way as well. It works very similar. You have a little sidebar that you can chat with. However, the main difference, I would say, is the sort of agent manager screen. So if you go into the editor, there's this little button at the top right that says Open Agent Manager. And that opens a different experience, more of a chat first experience where you're talking to it, and then it spins off little sub agents, it spins off things, it uses tools, etc. And it's not so much assisting you while you code. It's more of it's just taking the wheel and then just prompting you if it needs clarifications or things like that. And you can keep both windows open, of course, and see what it's actually doing. So it's a good experience. I'll say that. Initially, I was able to open my project. That worked just fine. I was able to get it to run. So basically, I opened the code first, the editor, and then I opened the agent manager because it looked fun. And I told it basically look at this project. This is what we're doing. These are some of the things that we're working on. Please just run it and see if it's working as it should. And so it ran it. It has access to the terminal, so it went through, and I'll show you a preview of what it did. And it goes through and it runs it, and it was able to open a browser with. That's one of the good things. That's like one of the benefits, I would say, of this versus many of the other tools. Since it is tightly integrated with Chrome, because it's Google at the end of the day, then it will automatically load a Google Chrome browser that is connected to the whole experience, and there's an extension that it adds, and it guides you to add it, etc. It's very easy, and then it can automatically take screenshots, run things, look at the console, etc. The same way you would if you take a few extra steps using VS Code or Cursor or whatever, and you install the Playwright MCP, for example. So that's what I was doing before. I had to set that up so that then I could tell it, use Playwright to take screenshots of this page and browse it, etc. This just does it out of the box. So that, I'll definitely give it points for that. Amazing experience. I didn't have to set up anything. I didn't have to do any MCPs, nothing. It just started working, looking at the screen, opened a browser. Very nice. So that part's good. Now, let's talk about some of the cons. The main one being it stops working. So I would say that is going to be the biggest thing to stop me from using something like this right now for real life. Okay, so it's good for just vibe coding, just having fun, but it's not ready yet, in my opinion. Today, everyone's talking about it, so it gets overloaded, etc. I understand. But today, if you're planning, you're working on a project, you got a new project, you're like, oh, I'm just going to throw Gemini at it. You could, of course, but just keep in mind, there might be situations during the day where you're working and it works great, and then it will suddenly just stop. And this reminds me of the experience with Manus when it first came out, and we got an invite, and we got in, and yeah, it's working, and then it just stops. Errors. It just too many people using it or whatever, and that's very inconvenient if you're using it for real work. I wouldn't expect this from a tool coming from Google at this point, really. For something like this, they have the infrastructure to support, I would suspect. But I mean, yes, the usage is huge, but is it though? Like, is it that huge that Google couldn't support the load? Didn't they expect, with all the hype that they're building around, is it the best model ever? Didn't they expect the load to be big? Weren't they prepared? I don't know. That's one thing. And I'll talk about positioning. I think it's Google is obviously very well positioned to do this, but these sort of growing pains are to be expected from one of the smaller companies that got in and scaled fast, but I wouldn't necessarily, though from past experience with Google, yeah, of course, they've killed off some other products just because, and they have some interesting ways to handle things. But I mean, load wise, I wouldn't expect it to be so buggy at this point, personal opinion. So I'm going to show you the screen and show you what the thought process behind it, exploring the code base and running through it, and my opinions on what things it did right up to this point and what things it didn't do as well, and where I saw some of the issues. And I'll talk about some very good points about it. I'm really enjoying. I stayed up working with it last night, and it is good. Like I said, there are some things where you smile and you're like, wow, okay, it did it better than Claude Code did. But there are other things where it's still running into the same type of junior dev kind of, like, it didn't think of the simplest solution for it and overcomplicated something, or didn't see an issue that was right in front of its face, that sort of thing, that you're like, well, you're supposed to be the smartest thing out there. So still, just like any other, It's not gonna just work like the demos. Some of these demos are great, especially like the game ones. I'm astounded. And if you think about it, like they have all the backend services that they can provide with it. That's one of the core benefits, I think, of Gemini, the positioning of it being a Google service and the way they can just integrate it with their services, and maybe they can integrate it with the whole Gemini platform such that you're building something and then it knows obviously all their APIs and endpoints and how their LLMs work, etc., and their maps capability, and they have so much around the web space that I think if you're building a product that's going to use Google infrastructure anyway, then it's going to be fantastic because they have all that already in theory. And so it can build something with a very nice UI and connect it to all of their services, and you could just use it and use their services, and that'll be great. I didn't find that it tried to push any of their services, which is good. It felt neutral in that sense. I even at some point told it, or well, it realized you've been using Apify to get some Google Maps data, and it didn't push me away from it. It said, yeah, we could do it with a Google Maps API or Apify, but let's use Apify, and actually just went through that route, and I'll show that in a little bit, which I found interesting, instead of it just pushing me to use their paid API, of course, to handle the same sort of data or scraping or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, overall it's good. But like I said, the main thing right now is that it just stops out of the blue, regardless of if it's paid or free or whatever. It's amazing that it's free right now, so you could go try it by all means. It's amazing. You can just use it with a Gmail account. Just use it. It's great. You don't need an API key. You don't need anything. You can just use it. It's free. That is crazy. And the free tier or whatever is good. It's very good. I was able to do a lot of things before I ran into your usage or whatever. Please upgrade to a key. I worked on it quite a bit more than I would have been able to on Claude Code with Opus, for example, even in the $100 a month or $200 a month package. So very interesting in that sense. Obviously, they're subsidizing it in a way to get people on it, but it's good. I found it good in that sense as well. So I mentioned it very many times. So I'll start sharing so we can discuss it. And let's see if I don't know if it'll come through on the vertical platform. So if you're on Instagram and you don't see what I'm sharing, sorry about that. I'll just explain it. But you can jump on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and you should be able to view it there. So let me see where we left off here. I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to share my screen here. And for those of you on the podcast as well, I'm going to be explaining everything, what I'm seeing. So it doesn't really matter if you're not observing the screen. So I will do window and then I will open Antigravity. Okay, so you should see my screen now, and I would like to be able to see myself as well. Layout. Okay, I can probably appear down here. All right, so if we look at the screen right now, this is Antigravity, and Antigravity, like I said, has two views. The editor view, it just looks like cursor VS Code, so don't really worry about that. And then you have the agent manager, which is what I'm showing right now on the screen. The difference being that the agent manager, like I said, is more of a chat interface where you are just talking to it and it'll build things and ask you if it needs additional context, etc. So if we look at this one, for example, I basically told it, this is the platform we're running, please run it and check what it does. And if you can run it, that would be great. And so it goes through and it finds obviously package.json, etc. It finds out it has the Google Maps integration, web scraping, search, etc., etc. And it goes down, reads the documentation, and then it proceeds to create an implementation plan. So this all looks like what you would expect with ChatGPT, Cloud, etc. So it writes an implementation plan down here, and then it analyzes the code base and creates a plan to import Google Maps data from museums, parks, and playgrounds. So this app, for context, is an app that has places for moms to take their kids in San Antonio. So if there's fun activities, parks, museums, this is a place to find those places, events, etc. Right? And so part of it is getting the data from different sources. And so at some point, I was creating some data import pipelines. I was basically going manually to Apify myself and doing a search on Google and then going to Apify and saying, okay, so I want these results, please give them to me. And Apify is a service that allows you to basically create an API out of different things. So you can have it go and treat Google Maps as an API with certain parameters, or it'll give you back the information you need, maybe it's many places with their images, with their reviews, things like that. And then you can parse the data, or it parses the data for you, puts it in a nice structure that then you can use. So it's a very nice tool for many things. I won't get into it too much, but that's what Apify helps you with. And so it, on its own, I didn't tell anything about Apify, goes in and finds these scripts that I had that already had some information in JSON. So it found that I had some JSON files with a list of museums or parks or things like that. And then it thought, mistakenly, it didn't ask me, it thought that I wanted to proceed and import those. So it goes in and starts trying to import those. So it goes in, tries to do the import, and then I'm like, no, that's not what we're gonna do. Now, if I expand this, you'll see that it actually goes in and created the script to do the import and starts processing the things. And some things fail. They start to add a bunch, and then they fail to process some images, and it fails to do some of these because they already exist. So there's a lot that already exist, and it's like there's a duplicate key, etc. Keep in mind, it knew from the way the thing is configured, the app is configured, it knew where to find the credentials in the environment variables file, and it knew how to call the database and get the information and see how the database was. And it knew how to run the scripts and things like that on its own, which is good. Again, I didn't tell it to install an MCP for Supabase or anything like that. It just went and did its thing. So that's also very nice, very well done. So it's having some trouble with this, and I tell it, no, I'm sorry, I didn't want to import those files. Instead, if you have a better way of getting those places, Google Maps, for example, here I'm telling it, like, by all means, I mean, use your own thing if you want. I'm all for it. Those scripts were just tests that I was doing manually to test through Apify. So basically, those were just files that I was creating so that I could generate the structure in the application. And so that's why they were there. But once it saw that, it says, switching to, and it's the thought process explaining everything. I'm currently focused on transitioning from static Apify JSON files to a more dynamic retrieval process. So this was very nice. This is something I wanted to do, but I never told it that I wanted to do this. It assumed well. Considering data integration methods, now contemplating specific methods for integrating data, moving beyond the initial Apify-centric approach, the user's preference for multiple sources, including Google Maps, potentially via an existing Apify endpoint, local websites is key. I'm refining the plan based on the to-do notes, considering both API integration and scraping options to achieve a comprehensive. All the LLMs just say comprehensive all the time. I don't know why. Anyway, data retrieval strategy for venues. Stopping and shifting focus. I've stopped the current import process and I'm shifting gears towards integrating Google Map data. The goal is to build an import from Google Maps feature in the admin UI, leveraging the API from Apify programmatically, which is a step towards automating and data enrichment. So it goes searching for credentials and then stops, and then it doesn't find an API key because I didn't have it there. I didn't ever placed it in my environment variables. So I then go and I place the Apify token in my variables. And just with that, I tell it, there it is. And so it goes in and it plans to build a dynamic import feature in the admin panel. And actually does it, and it does it quite well. So in the panel, it builds this import places thing that allows us to search Google Maps inside the app and then choose the items that we want to import. So it just did it on its own. So it opened the browser and everything, and it went through and tested it, and etc. Basically created a view for us where I could just search coffee shops in San Antonio. It will do via Apify, the scrape or the search or whatever, brings back the results, places them in little cards on the screen with checkboxes. It shows me the reviews and everything. I could just check the ones I want and then click import, and it will automatically import them into the schema that I already have for the database, into the, for those who are not technical, into the sort of the model, the way these are structured in the database. If you imagine a form, when you want to create something, you might have a title, description, images, reviews, etc., opening times, all that. It already knows all that because it read the code. So it didn't ask me for anything. It just created this dynamic import feature. Visual, looks good, actually looks great. It looks just like the rest of the UI in the system. I should actually just show you what that looks like. So if I go to stop here, and then I'm going to share another screen, I'm going to do this one. Okay, so this is the import places one. And so if I did bark or parks, I don't know, I'm gonna do park. It goes and searches. Again, it just built it within the conversation without me telling it, something that makes sense for an admin in a platform like this. So it created this thing goes, does the search, Apify parses the data, etc., brings it back. This thing automatically generates all the little cards with the details, etc. I have no idea if it's going to get work now. I don't even have credits on Apify. This was just an API key that was new, so they give you like $5 or something that you could use every day. There it is. So it brought these in. It shows us the number of reviews, the address, a little image for them, and I can go in here and be like, oh, this looks good, maybe this one looks good, maybe this spark looked good, this one, and this one. And so then I could do import selected, and it will go ahead. Again, I have no idea if it'll work again, but it did. Successfully imported 5 items. And so now in the content section, it will have the new items that we just added. And it brought in all the information from it. So it brought all these details. I don't think it brought the images, but it brought the location, settings, etc. And so if we actually look at the site itself, probably if we do this, we'll see Lady Bird Johnson, McAllister Park. They have their images, and these images, if we're seeing them here, it actually brought them in, stored them in the database so that we're not using Google URLs. And of course, this is not a very big image. I have to prompt it further and say use, well, I'll get to that point in a second, but Apify has another parameter that allows it to get higher resolution images. But look at this. So we're getting all the accessibility, amenities, review highlights, what people search for, the location. All of these fields we used to have in our database already. So it understood that, and it was able to pull the data without us telling it anything from Apify, parse it, put it in the right place, but within this fantastic little import places feature that it just created out of the blue. So let that sink in. If you've ever built an application or anything software related, that is powerful. So I'm giving it some points here for this achievement. Why? Because the demos that they show, a lot of times it's just starting from scratch. Starting from scratch is relatively easy, especially building landing pages or even a little game, etc. It becomes complex when it has to build a database, create users, authentication, manage sessions, etc. Most of the demos you'll see don't have any of that. Some do. But still, creating it from scratch is a lot easier because it can control the whole flow. It just builds whatever it thinks, and it might do a very good job at it. However, putting it in an existing project that may or may not be well done, etc., and the fact that it can go in, create a feature, add it, have the feature work with the database, with the authentication, with an external API, within an existing code base is impressive. That was something that I don't think Claude Code, which is my tool of choice at the moment, would have achieved that quickly without excessive prompting. It would have taken a longer conversation, I would say. Can it do it? Yes, of course. Probably it would need more context. Here, I didn't give it any real context. It just did it. So that was good. I really like that because this is a feature that I wanted to add anyway. It just did it for me. Didn't really have to tell it, and it did it very well. So it gives me a little peace of mind knowing that, okay, so I think I could have it add additional features. So points for that. If you want to use it in an existing code base, then it might actually do a decent job of it. So that's good. Now let's go back to the other screen that we were looking at. So I'm going to share the window of Antigravity again. And if we look at it here, we see that it went in, it created the dynamic import feature, and then there was an error. So there was an Next.js error with chat.cn. It found some deprecated packages, etc., and it went and fixed it. Refreshed the caches, etc. Everything worked, fixed the alert, and that's good. Okay. Now, one of the issues that I was seeing as I was going through this is that it would stop. So this looks like a nice conversation, but in many of these parts, it was working just fine and doing a lot of steps, and then it stopped. And we got an error. And the error just said, the agent stopped because of an error. That's it, nothing else. So I had to tell it continue, and then it continued. And sometimes it didn't. And so fortunately, if you wait a while and just tell it again or just prompt it again, it'll continue. It doesn't just kill your session like some of the other competitors do. And mine has that happened a lot where it would just die and you couldn't really do anything else. Here, it'll sort of stop, tell you that you might want to start a new conversation or continue or whatever. I just tell it continue, like write continue. And it has worked quite well. Another thing that I think is impressive is this conversation lasted probably 2 hours and worked really nicely in the sense that I never saw a context window overload. There's no visibility of the context actually that I know of. I think it's important to have it if it's going to affect you, but here it doesn't seem to show it, but it doesn't seem to care anyway. I guess because the context window is huge, but I haven't run into any issues where it has to compress the conversation, or at least it hasn't told me that it's compressing the conversation. So in that sense, it's good. It just feels like a user tool, not necessarily a developer tool. Because if it's meant to be a user tool as well, then yeah, users will get very confused with context windows and things like that. So here it's doing its thing. It verified the dynamic import feature. That all worked great. And then it verified the data import. And it could see that it did. So it says go to admin import, try it. And then we noticed that it was adding a bunch of things that didn't make sense, that probably weren't parks and things like that. And I think that was just because of the initial import that it tried to import a bunch of things that we had in the JSON file. So I told it, hey, there's a bunch of things like HVAC, car dealerships, etc., that we don't want here. They don't make sense. Can you help me clean it up? So it creates a little script and it starts removing some items. This is something that it didn't do well. It removed, I think, 9 items. And I said, yeah, but look, these are the categories that I'm interested in. Park, city park, playground, art studio, museum, art gallery, etc. Find things like that. Keep those. Get rid of the rest. And it does it. And again, it just does like 10 or 9. It removed some, but there were still like 700. And that's the part where, again, it was acting like a junior dev. It was doing the least amount of work necessary, I would say. And that's where you get a little frustrated. You're performing like an expert, and then suddenly the IQ drops down to nothing. So at that point, I just said, you know what, just keep these 5 get rid of everything else. And so it goes in and gets rid of everything else and just keeps, I think, 5 of them or something. That it did well. Now, this part that it's doing here is another thing I want to point out. When I was doing it in Claude Code, I had to connect the Supabase MCP, for example, so that it knew how to interact with Supabase and do things. Or I had to tell it, look at the documentation so that you can use the API here. Again, I didn't tell it anything. It just knew how to talk to it. So up to a point, I think it does a good job of abstracting away whether it's using MCP or tools, or it just knows how to use the API endpoints and does it dynamically directly from the console, the terminal. I think that's okay. It's a personal preference. It just gets out of your way and it's just working, and it'll show you and you can look at the things and see what it's actually doing. But all these, some it does by creating scripts, some it does by actually talking to the database, and it's good. I found that very interesting. I did again here where it's saying that there, or I said there are missing images. It didn't notice. There was a point here where it just said, okay, I'm done. So I had given it a to-do file that has a lot of things, and I expected it, from what everyone's talking about, to just go in and go crazy and start building things and adding features and things. And no, it just, for whatever reason, it focused on the imports part of it, which I never told it was a priority. And it finished. Like, it told me, okay, I'm done. We're done. Like, that's the end of the work. And it's not at all, not even a little part of the end of the work. So I found that interesting. It didn't sort of use a to-do file to understand and maybe make a detailed plan of further action, or even tell me, well, this is completed, now we should do this. What do you want to continue with? That's something that Claude Code does very well. So points reduced in this case for planning ahead, and I think that wasn't very well executed. Other than that, I noticed that some of the images weren't there, most of them actually, and I told it because it didn't figure it out on its own. And so I told it, why don't they have images? Only 3 have images. And so it goes in and it queries the database and it checks why. Look, if we expand this, so it goes here, it inspects the images, it analyzes them, it creates a lot of scripts. So its way of doing things a lot of times is creating TypeScript files and running them. And then it does run some curl requests and the terminal to get the images, try to find them, etc. And it finds out that it's getting some permission errors for the images, mostly because these are Google images and they typically either have a short time frame to live, or they cannot be accessed directly, to avoid scraping and things like that. So it goes and finds the items and tells me, yes, well, these items have the forbidden error. So my recommendation, or the fastest fix, is to go to admin content, edit those items, and upload a cover image manually. What? Like, what does that mean? In the context of everything we're talking about, why would it think to suggest that I should go in and edit the items and add a cover image manually? If the whole point is to make it more efficient, it actually built a thing to import things, why would I, in my right mind, ask it to do all that so that then I have to go into Google Maps or something, get an image manually, download it to my computer, and then upload it to the place? That makes no sense. So again, IQ lowered here. So I said, no, I want to be able to fetch the images directly, either via Apify or Google Maps, whichever works best. I want to be able to get the images, download them to our app instead of loading them from Google. Now it becomes smart again and says, okay, so I updated the search route, etc. Let me check for the API keys, blah, blah, blah. And then it upgrades the import process so that it can actually bring the images in, which we saw earlier in the demo that it actually did. It works. But this is where I think it did something very good. It fixed it, but then goes down, says, I fixed it. Great. It celebrates itself. So good for it. And then down here, it goes in and fixes, where is it? This one here. It finds the ones that already had the issue and runs a script to fix those images directly. So I don't have to do anything about those. So it went in, re-imported, fixed the ones that had the issues. That was great. So again, points for that. I think that was a good execution, and it was very kind of it to go in and fix that as well. Then we had some issues with the featured content checkbox. So on the site itself, if we look at it, we can see that there is a window. If we look at the homepage, this is a work in progress, of course, but if you look at the homepage, it has this featured this week section. And when you're editing a property, you can mark it as featured content here, supposedly. You click update and it should mark it as featured content. And so the issue, and that's probably the issue that we're seeing here, there's a hydration issue, etc., with Next.js. And so it's not really doing it. It's not saving it. And so because it should show here. So my next conversation with it, the one that I was going to do before I started the live stream, was telling it to fix that particular issue. So if we go back and we share Antigravity again, then we can see that here it's, I refactored the handler to fix the featured field because there's something missing, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really work. And so then it goes again, it says, I have to use the controller for the checkbox and it's ensuring strict Boolean type safety. And this just sounds smart, but it's not really smart. And it says, I applied a stronger fix. I switched the checkbox to use a controller, which ensures the form state and the UI stay perfectly in sync. It should definitely work now. Of course it doesn't. But like all LLMs, it's very proud of itself and it says it did it. Now here is, again, where I say, don't just believe the hype around the model. This is going to be amazing. It's the best thing out there. You don't need to know how to code. You don't need to know anything. It'll just work. Yes, you can build a lot of applications and things now by coding without knowing anything, but you still have to look at what it's doing, pay attention, because sometimes it'll just tell you that it did something, and you might assume that by it telling you that it did something and being all excited about it and overly positive, you might say, well, it knows what it's doing. It probably works. And it will just silently fail. And you might not even notice. This is a clear feature because I'm asking it for it. But in another thing, if you told it to build a big application or a big game or whatever, and especially if it's important for business, you might think it already implemented what you asked it to because it ran all the checks, whatever, and it didn't really do it. It just told you it did it. And sometimes it'll fool itself and it'll fool you into thinking that it did what you asked it. So you still have to be very careful, even if it's the best thing out there or what people say. It's always important to double check and make sure that things work. And that's where tests come in. I'm sure this particular IDE is very good at tests. If you tell it in your prompt, make sure you create tests and run them against the code, etc. It's probably very good at doing that and will take away much of the effort from your part. But at least that way you could see it running through, taking the screenshots, checking the different things, running actual command line tests to make sure that things pass and that they have the valid values and all that. That will also help if you do that way, instead of just blindly assuming that what it's telling you is true. So this one, again, its IQ dropped drastically, so it started fixing it, and like Claude Code and like ChatGPT and like any others, it said, yes, I did it. This time it works. And it doesn't. It doesn't really do anything. And I felt at this point that it might be a context window thing. I'm not sure. This is what starts to happen when you use one of these models and you get closer to the end of the context window, it starts being less good, less smart, because it has to keep track of a lot of things, and it's just not good at it. So that's why a lot of the experts will tell you use subagents. So instead of having a huge project, a huge conversation with everything, you should have one main orchestrator one that keeps track of the main thread, basically, and then throw out little subagents to do part of the UI or part of the authentication or part of this other thing, and then each one has its own context and things like that. Now, this is supposed to do that behind the scenes with its own thing, so that's why I don't understand why it gets less smart as it goes, but it's probably part of the same. In any case, here it just looks like when some of the other models I've seen are just having a bad day. So it's just, yes, I did it, I found it, and it even puts a little detective icon on it. And of course it doesn't work. But anyway, it keeps telling me, and this is where it died again, and I just kept telling it to continue, and it never fixed it. So this was a lot of back and forth before the call, just seeing if it would do it, and it didn't. So is it the amazing game changer that everyone was talking about? I don't know. Will it move the waters? Yes, of course. It does some things really well, and I would say better than some of the others. I'll give it that. Very easy to use. I'll give it that too. The model itself is, as proven by what people are testing and the benchmark, etc., it is very, very, very good. I won't take anything away from the model itself and say it's good. I think the real power will come two ways. One is as they grow, if they keep it, as they grow their IDE, the Antigravity, which is a cool name, if they keep at it and keep making it better and don't kill it like they've killed many of their products, then yeah, it's a good contender for Cursor and anything VS Code and all the others. So yeah, that would be a good thing. I think there's good competition, and since it's the same structure, VS Code type interface, then people can just jump in and use it. So that part is good. Now, where the real power, I think, stands is Google's positioning in the whole ecosystem. Because while OpenAI is focused on just like everyone using it, not necessarily businesses, not necessarily power users, not necessarily developers, just everyone, that they have their share, right, of the market. And then Anthropic is focusing on enterprise. They're doing a lot with enterprise, and they're mostly business oriented in the sense of revenue, which is a great thing. I think they chose a good market. Google has the benefit of having a lot of the planet on their services and having a lot of additional services behind it. So they can very easily become the biggest just because of the installed space that they have, especially if the whole deal with Apple, Siri, whatever they're doing works out, then yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. And also, obviously, they have Android, so they can just put this power into everyone's hands that has Android. That's a big chunk of the planet as well. So yes, they have very, very good potential to make something great, and also to keep the experience simple, because I think we're all moving towards this agentic kind of experience more than looking at the code itself, because at the end of the day, like I've said in other conversations, the code was just a way for us humans to create a way for us to interact with the machine, which actually talks in bits, right? And so it's not that you have to learn code. We created the code to be able to talk to the computer. So if now the code means I can talk to it directly, by all means. So it's not whether you know how to code. It's just that if the thing knows how to code, just make sure that it knows what it's doing. But now we're at that point. So if you're able to engineer, then it doesn't matter if you're talking to it on your phone or on the screen or by voice, it'll do its job. And so having Android on a lot of things, then on iPhones or whatever, That would be very interesting when they all have a way to just interact via voice and just tell it what you want, and it'll show you what it's doing, and it could just spin up nodes and computers and sub processes and agents and do things for you without you having to be in a desktop computer actually building this stuff. I think that's sort of where we're headed. And it's going to be very interesting. And I think Google is properly placed to be able to achieve that. So again, we'll see. I don't know where their priorities lie, but everyone's talking about this. So I thought it was valid to just have a different point of view as to whether it's better than Claude Code or any of the others. Am I moving over to Gemini 3? No, I don't think so. I'm very happy working with Claude Code as it stands. It does what I need. Sonnet 4.5 is very good, and it's a good tool to have. And I think I will continue to test the Gemini and Antigravity software, but while it maintains the error rate that it has, where it's just stopping the flow out of the just out of the blue, that's not okay for business. You cannot depend on a tool that's just hiccuping as much. Once they fix that, then yeah, it might be worth a deeper look into whether it's doing things better than Claude Code. But at this point, I think everyone is going to be looking at what everyone else is doing and just adding those features into their own systems. So we'll see. It's a good tool. I think it's up to a very good start. And of course, I didn't talk about all the capabilities of the model, but of course, with all everything they have, they're very good at image generation, video generation, and with Nano Banana, etc. It's amazing. So you can imagine if they tie everything together as they're doing, you will be able to very quickly generate a very advanced AI first type application. So if you need a very quick app for your business or a very quick game or a very quick experience, you can very quickly generate something that's going to be able to generate images on the fly, generate summaries on the fly, generate video within the experience of the app. So that's, I think that's also where we're going, where these apps will no longer just be basic to-do task lists, etc. It will be more of a AI enhanced applications where even what we're talking about here is not going to just show you a list of places. It'll determine in real time, based on the places that there are and what it knows about you, what places you would like to go to because of the age of your kids and the distance from where you are and the traffic that is currently there because it could tie into Google Maps, and how much time you have because of your calendar because it's connected to Google Calendar, and also where friends that you know might be going because it's connected to the social feed. So ton of stuff you can do, and it's going to be very exciting. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. What do you think about the Gemini 3 Pro, and of course about Antigravity, which is very interesting. Just learned about it last night. So let me know, and please follow and like and subscribe if you like the show and if you like the videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.